Welcome to the Love Government. I'm Dennis Leary, the founder of the Love Government. We're doing a series of videos here on sex signs. This will be the 5th episode in this series. They're being presented more or less in sequence, so that I'm building on the previous 4. We are investigating the love culture, which is the foundation for the love government. This love culture existed in Africa 100,000 years ago. I'm just presenting that as a mythical, fictional number that I made up, but it has scientific reasons for doing so. So get your Google Earth machine turned on in your head, and we're going to zoom in on Africa and then East Africa and near the big lake, used to be called Lake Victoria, and then you got to twist that time button there and then also the space button, so you zoom in on East Africa to a sample of the love culture of that time. Now we're going to zoom in even further and talk about what is called a circle, a woman's circle. And listen in what they're talking about and how they are. I have said already that the culture of that time was centered on the woman as being the all-attractive one, the carrier of the life, the bearer of the children, and the main storyteller. The men are kind of like on the outside of the circle. Oh, don't cry, men. Take it like a man. Men are kind of like on the periphery, but very important. Every center of a circle has to have a circumference, or you can't have a center. The men are very important, just as important, to this whole love culture. But there is a difference. They are the protectors, the defenders, and the supporters of this whole love system. And if the men go bad, it's going to drag everything along with them. In my opinion, men did go bad. It's called the proverbial fall of man. And the big word for it is patriarchy, which was a rebellion against lovearchy. And this fall of man has taken us all with them. Basically, they have fallen away from woman. They have, in their desire to assert their own power and their own dominance, they have had to turn women into objects. And what today in our culture we have commercialization and pornification, etc., etc. Violence all along the way. So this woman's circle was the holy of holies, the center of the center. And it was just very ordinary looking. Women sit in a circle while they do their work, whatever they did, taking the shells, taking the husks off of nuts or seeds, or taking care of the children. You see it today. You go to a park and the women have their blankets and their children. They're sitting in a circle talking with each other, whatever they talk about. And the children are playing on the swings or the teeter-totters, and the men may be in the circle. I mean, it's not prevented, but the men may be with the children, or the men are with themselves, organizing a sports game or something. But the women, generally speaking, form that inner circle. And that was called, by a modern word, a governance system. The women were the governors of the system. They held it together, not by power, not by force, but by just being who they were. They had the power naturally, but it was not a power over. They had the wisdom because they were sharing it with each other. It was a give and take type of thing. And sure, there were differences even there. Some women stood out from others, having a little more intelligence, a little more keen insight into things, a little better memory, and so on. So they would become the natural leaders. We call them the matrons of the community, or the grandmothers, or the grand lovers of the community. So a mature woman's life generally went in this pattern. First she's a maiden, then she's a mother, and then she becomes a matron. Those three stages of an adult woman's life. So the women carried the culture with them. Now, the women were not like the women of today. So we're looking through eyeglasses that are colored with patriarchal values. So we see it, and it's very hard not to do this, because we're seeing through the eyes of thousands and thousands of years of a male-dominated way of looking at things. It's called, conditioning, sometimes propaganda, and the way we view ourselves today is not accurate. It's been corrupted, been perverted, been changed. We're trying to get back to the true way of who we were. So, the women's circle in terms of sexuality. What did the women do? How intimate were they with each other at that time? The evidence that I can read says they were way less inhibited than we were. In other words, they expressed their affection for each other more openly, freely. Remember, it's the tropics. Life is, there's no hurry, no worry. They're relaxed. They don't have the fears, the worries, the concerns, the threats that we do, or the conditioning. No. And they are, in a way, they're in charge. So they're not threatened by anything, really. So they're more open, free with each other. And their affections would be open and free, including their sexuality. Now, this is the difficult point, I think, for us to even imagine, is that women had sex with each other. And it was perfectly natural. It was perfectly normal. That seems strange, and it seems a little bit untrue or weird or gross or something to us. But remember, we're looking through the lenses that are muddied by all the conditioning we've had. And if you think about it, what's wrong with it? To have sex with your peers if you really love them. Not that sex is like ours, is an obsession, like we're so lacking in it. No, it's just part of the natural ebb and flow of things. And sometimes men were also involved. They would be invited in to the women's circle, but they did not intrude themselves. They did not force themselves. They did not try to trick or bribe or buy something off. They were invited into the circles when it was time for sex. And as we said before, unlike the animals, our species can have sex all the time. And in that culture, what did people do? They had all the time in the world on their hands. What did they do? They didn't have sex all the time, no doubt, because they had a lot of other things to do. But lots of the time they had sex. And it was natural, it was expected. And all kinds of sex. They didn't have to worry about diseases. And in that culture, there were natural built-in safeguards, so sex didn't get perverse or weird or gross you out or get disgusting. That's all comes from our conditioning. They had all the time in the world, and they were open and free about it, and they could express it when they wanted to. They had rituals, as we all do. We have rituals, and these were sexual rituals in which they acted out the way they understood themselves. They reenacted what they thought was their beginnings. This is where the stories come in. And this is where we enter into sexual signs, which are really like signposts or stories along the way. They told themselves stories. Now, what was the most important thing? What was the important thing in their culture was themselves. The women were the most important thing. This is borne out, just to get a little off the track here, by archaeology. If you go back 30,000 years or 20, 15,000 years, all of the artifacts were of women, practically none of men. The little things they held in their hands, some say these were actually sexual aids, or they heard things from these things. But there's millions of them uncovered in archaeology. Millions of little handheld objects of women, sometimes pregnant, sometimes it's like modern art or something. And then you go back 30,000 years, the very first carvings we have, the goddess of Willendorf or something like that, is 30,000 years ago. It's of a woman. So the culture was basically, woman-centered. And it was highly sexual. It makes us feel a little bit uneasy, but it was natural to them. They had sexual ceremonies that reenacted their own origin story. Now, the woman was the main focus, so they made up a story, a myth, in which they condensed all of themselves and all of their experiences into a single focus, a symbol, a sign, a central metaphor. And that was what I call the lover. See, all of the people at that time were lovers. They were engaged in open, free, communal sexuality, which is basically translated as being a good lover. So when you make up a story, you condense it into one lover, or two or three, but mainly one lover, and we call her the lover. In the love government writings, that occurs over and over. It's a condensation, it's a putting together, it's grouping all of us lovers into one central symbol, who we call the lover. So the story of where they came from the lover. Because they're all lovers, right? It's open, free. And the lover is she's free, open, beautiful, life generative. So this lover is in their minds and in their hearts and is in their stories. The lover is the basic starting point of everything for them. And really also for us, the way I look at it anyway. All of this world, all of this reality, all of this creation is the body of the lover. This is where it's at. And this lover is not going anywhere in particular. If you want to think of it this way, in dancing terms, she's dancing in place. This world, with all its galaxies of stars and its galaxies of atoms going down the micro level, and all the planets and the star systems, and then this Earth with all of our beauty, all of this activity going on, is the body of the lover. She's dancing in place. And then you'll have a lot of stories and a lot of sexual rights, love rights, dancing rights, and so on come off of that idea. There's only one reality, and that's a lover. So thank you for listening. This has been episode 5. We're going to continue with this story through the following episodes. So have a very wonderful, happy, joy-filled day.